At the family reunion, my mother stood up in front of 30 relatives, looked straight at me, and said, "Don't listen to her. She has no idea what she's talking about." I wasn't trying to humiliate her. I was trying to stop something that was already falling apart. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. And that afternoon was the day I realized telling the truth can cost you your place in your own family. The reunion was loud and warm at first. Long tables in my aunt's backyard, plastic cups, cousins running around, uncles arguing about politics. My mother moved through the crowd like she always did, confident, smiling, talking about renovations to her house and a new investment opportunity she said was going well. I had heard that tone before, 2 months earlier. I had answered her phone when she left it on the kitchen counter. The screen kept lighting up with unknown numbers. When I picked up, a man on the other end asked about overdue balances and final notices. He spoke calmly, like someone who makes those calls every day. That wasn't the only call. There were letters too, red stamps, payment deadlines. One envelope mentioned foreclosure if the account wasn't brought current. I didn't confront her right away. I asked gently at first, "Mom, are you okay financially?" She brushed it off. "It's temporary. Don't worry about grown-up matters." But it wasn't temporary. The calls kept coming. The letters kept arriving. And every time I tried to talk to her, she became defensive and angry, as if I had accused her of something shameful. At the reunion, I listened as she told my aunt about upgrading her kitchen cabinets. Something inside me tightened. The bank had already warned her twice. She was weeks behind, and no one knew. When my uncle joked about how she always had her life together, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. "I think we should talk about what's really going on," I said carefully. "Mom's been getting calls from the bank. They've mentioned foreclosure." The table went silent. Forks stopped moving. Conversations faded mid-sentence. My mother froze for half a second. Then she slowly stood up. Her face didn't show panic. It showed control. "Don't listen to her," she said clearly, looking around at everyone. "She has no idea what she's talking about." A few relatives shifted uncomfortably. "I've seen the letters," I continued, my voice steady even though my heart was pounding. "This isn't gossip. The house is at risk." She turned toward me fully then, her expression sharp. "You're exaggerating," she said. "I am handling it." "Handling it how?" I asked quietly. "By pretending it doesn't exist?" Her voice rose just enough for everyone to hear. "I don't know why you're doing this," she said. "Why would you try to embarrass me in front of our family?" That hit harder than anything else. "I'm not trying to embarrass you," I replied. "I'm trying to help you. If I were in real trouble," she said firmly, scanning the table. "Do you really think I'd let my own daughter expose me like this?" There it was. In one sentence, she turned me from concerned daughter into ungrateful accuser. My aunt looked at me with confusion. My cousins avoided my eyes. My uncle cleared his throat and reached for his drink. The doubt spread quickly. I felt it. "I've seen the documents," I insisted. "You're behind on payments. This isn't small." She shook her head slowly, like she was disappointed in me. "You've always misunderstood things," she said. "You see a piece of paper and think you know everything." The humiliation wasn't loud. It was heavy. It settled over the table and stayed there. No one defended me. No one asked her for proof. It was easier to believe I was overreacting than to imagine she was losing control. I looked at her and realized something painful. She would rather call me a liar than admit she needed help. I stood up slowly. "I didn't say this to hurt you," I said quietly. "I said it because the bank won't stay quiet forever." She didn't respond. She just sat down and began talking to my aunt again, as if I hadn't spoken at all. I waited for someone to stop me as I walked away from the table. No one did. As I reached the gate, I understood something clearly. I had tried to save her, and she had chosen pride instead. I left without saying goodbye. What I didn't know then was that the bank would eventually say what I wasn't allowed to, and when it did, The silence around that table would sound very different before that reunion. I had already tried to save her. It didn't start with one dramatic discovery. It started with small things that didn't make sense. A late-night phone ringing over and over. Letters marked urgent tucked under magazines as if paper could hide consequences. The way she would quickly flip envelopes upside down when I walked into the room. The first time I picked up one of those calls, the man on the other end assumed I was her. "I'm calling about the overdue balance on the Harper property," he said in a calm, practiced voice. "If payment isn't received by the 15th, we will begin the foreclosure process." Foreclosure. That word didn't belong in our kitchen. I stepped outside to finish the call, my heart pounding while I tried to ask careful questions without revealing I wasn't her. The amount he mentioned was not small. It wasn't a missed utility bill. It was months of mortgage payments stacked on top of a second loan she had taken against the house. When I confronted her later that night, I didn't accuse her. I sat down across from her and said quietly, "Mom, the bank is calling about the house." She didn't look shocked. She looked irritated. "They exaggerate," she said. "That's how they scare people into paying faster." "How far behind are you?" I asked. She stood up and started washing dishes that were already clean, as if movement could end the conversation. "It's temporary," she replied. "I'm reorganizing some investments." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But the numbers I had heard on the phone didn't sound temporary. Over the next few weeks, more pieces fell into place. I found out she had refinanced the house twice in 3 years. She had opened new credit cards. She had taken out a personal loan using the house as collateral. And yet, at family gatherings, she spoke about upgrades and opportunities as if everything was stable. She wasn't just struggling, she was pretending not to. One evening, I tried again. "We need to sit down and look at everything," I said, placing the unopened letters on the table. "If you're in trouble, we can figure it out. But ignoring it won't fix it." She stared at the envelopes as if they had betrayed her. "You think I don't know how to handle my own finances?" she asked sharply. "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying?" "I'm saying the house is at risk." Her expression hardened immediately. "The house is fine." "It's not fine," I insisted, keeping my voice calm. "They've mentioned legal action." She laughed in a way that didn't sound amused. "You've always liked drama," she said. "You hear one serious word and you think the world is ending." This wasn't drama, this was math. "How much do you owe?" I asked again. "That's none of your concern." "It is if you lose the house." Her jaw tightened. "I will not lose this house," she said firmly. "Do you understand how that would look? After everything I've built?" There it was. Not fear of debt. Not fear of losing shelter. Fear of how it would look. That was the moment I understood the real problem. She wasn't borrowing money to survive. She was borrowing money to maintain an image. The renovations, the gifts, the stories about success. They weren't signs of stability. They were attempts to prove something to people who weren't paying her bills. "You don't need to impress anyone," I told her gently. "You need to protect what you have left." She pushed the letters toward me as if they were garbage. "I am protecting it," she snapped, "and I don't need my daughter lecturing me." "I'm not lecturing you. I'm trying to help." She shook her head. "No," she said. "You're trying to control me." That hurt more than being called dramatic in front of the family. Because I wasn't trying to control her. I was trying to stop a collapse. When the reunion happened and I spoke up, it wasn't an impulsive decision. It was the last attempt after private conversations had failed. I hoped that if other adults heard the truth, they might convince her to take it seriously. Instead, she chose pride. She chose to protect her reputation over facing reality. And when she stood up and called me out in front of everyone, she wasn't just denying the debt. She was choosing denial over rescue. I walked away from that reunion knowing one thing clearly. I had tried every quiet way possible. The next voice she would hear wouldn't belong to me. It would belong to the bank. and they would not care about saving her pride. After the reunion, I didn't call her again to argue. Not because I stopped caring, but because I finally understood that every time I spoke, she heard accusation instead of concern. For a few days, I kept checking my phone, hoping she would reach out differently this time. I imagined her saying, "Let's sit down and look at everything calmly." I imagined her admitting the numbers scared her. I imagined her letting me help. Instead, what reached me was something else. Distance. My aunt called me a week later, her voice careful. "Your mom says you misunderstood the paperwork." I didn't react. 2 days after that, my cousin sent me a message. "Are things really that bad? Or did you exaggerate a little?" Exaggerate. Slowly, the story shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. My mother had begun explaining the reunion in her own version. She told them I panicked over normal bank letters. She said I made it sound worse than it was. She said I embarrassed her over something temporary. And people believed her, not because they wanted to accuse me, but because believing her was easier than imagining she was losing her house. At the next small family dinner, the tone toward me had changed. Conversations were polite, but cautious. No one brought up the house. No one asked questions. I could feel the unspoken thought in the room. Claire always worries too much. That hurt more than her calling me out publicly, because it meant the doubt had settled. A month later, I drove past her house on my way home from work. I hadn't planned to stop, but I slowed down when I saw a black sedan parked in the driveway with a small sign on the door. Legal services. My stomach tightened. It wasn't a neighbor's car. It wasn't a friend's visit. It looked official. That night, I called her again. "Are they sending legal representatives to the house?" I asked carefully. "It's routine," she replied quickly. "Just restructuring." "Restructuring what?" I pressed. "Why are you always assuming the worst?" she snapped. "Do you have nothing else to focus on?" "I'm focusing on you," I said. "That's the problem." "You worry too much," she said again, her voice firm, as if repeating it would make it true. The call ended the same way they all did, with her dismissing everything and me feeling like I was shouting into a wall. A few weeks later, another voicemail came to my phone by mistake. A different voice this time, more direct. "If payment is not received by the deadline, foreclosure proceedings will begin immediately." Immediately. There was no softness in that word, no room for interpretation. I sat there holding the phone and realized something clearly. If I called her, she would deny it again. If I confronted her, she would say I misunderstood. If I warned her, she would accuse me of attacking her. So I stopped, not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't keep fighting someone who refused to see the fire spreading around her. I stopped checking her mailbox when I visited. I stopped answering unknown numbers. I stopped collecting evidence she would only reject. We didn't have a dramatic argument. We didn't officially cut ties. We just drifted. Birthdays became short phone calls. Holidays became polite visits. The house was never mentioned again, as if silence could freeze reality. But debt doesn't disappear because you stop talking about it. Interest continues to grow. Deadlines continue to move forward. Banks do not get tired. 2 years after that reunion, I received a message from my cousin. "Have you heard about Aunt Maria's house?" Before I opened the next text, I already knew. "It's being auctioned." The word hit differently than foreclosure. Auction meant it was past negotiation, past denial, past pride. I stared at the screen, feeling something heavy settle in my chest. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't anger. It was the painful confirmation that everything I had tried to prevent had happened exactly the way I feared. The house wasn't saved. It wasn't restructured. It was being taken. And this time, no one could call me dramatic. Because the bank doesn't exaggerate. It just collects. And I knew then that when she finally admitted I had tried to save her, it wouldn't be in front of family. It would be after everything she tried to protect was already gone. The day the bank put a notice on her front door. No one laughed. There was no music, No long tables. No cousins running across the yard. There was just a printed document taped to the wood, with bold letters that made everything official. Foreclosure proceedings initiated. My aunt sent me a photo of it before I even heard from my mother. "Is this what you were talking about?" she wrote. I stared at the image for a long time. The house looked smaller in that picture. The paint slightly faded, the lawn uneven. It no longer looked like the place my mother described at family gatherings, polished, upgraded, stable. It looked vulnerable. Within days, the calls started again, but this time, they weren't from collectors. They were from relatives. "What's going on? Did you know it was this bad?" "Why didn't she say anything?" I answered honestly. "I tried." Some were quiet after that. Some apologized in small, awkward ways. No one said directly that they had doubted me, but I heard it between the pauses. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was her. For a second, I thought about letting it go to voicemail, not out of anger, out of exhaustion. But I answered. Her voice sounded different. Not proud, not sharp, not defensive. Tired. "They're taking it," she said. I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. "When?" I asked gently. "In a few weeks. Unless..." She stopped. "Unless what?" "Unless I come up with the remaining balance." I knew what that number probably looked like. Years of missed payments, fees, interest, legal costs. It wouldn't be small. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I asked quietly. She let out a slow breath. "I thought I could fix it." "With what?" "With time," she replied. Time. That was the one thing debt doesn't forgive. There was a long silence between us. It felt heavier than any argument we had ever had. "I tried to warn you," I said carefully, not accusing, just stating. "I know," she whispered. It was the first time she had said that. I shouldn't have said what I said at the reunion. The memory flashed back, her standing, her voice clear, the way everyone looked at me. "You called me a liar," I said. "I was scared," she admitted. Not angry, scared. "I didn't want them to know," she continued. "I didn't want anyone to think I had failed." "And now?" I asked. "They know." There was no defense left in her voice, no explanation, no attempt to shift blame. Just reality. "I thought if I kept everything looking stable, I could fix it quietly," she said. "I didn't want to be the woman who lost her house. But you became the woman who pushed away the only person trying to help." I replied softly. Another silence. This one didn't feel hostile. It felt honest. "You were right," she said finally. "I just didn't want you to be..." That hurt more than anything else. Not because she admitted I was right, but because she chose pride over partnership. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I don't know," she answered. For the first time in my life, my mother didn't sound in control, and I realized something that surprised me. I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad, because being proven right didn't undo the damage. It didn't bring back the house. It didn't erase the way she had stood up and dismissed me in front of everyone. "You tried to save me," she said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "I see that now." The admission didn't come in front of relatives. It didn't come with applause. It came in a quiet phone call, after the bank had already spoken louder than I ever could. And as I sat there listening to her breathe on the other end of the line, I understood something clearly. The hardest part wasn't losing the house. It was losing the illusion that pride can protect you from consequences. And now, we were left with what pride had cost us. After that call, she didn't ask me for money. That surprised me. I had expected it. Expected her to circle back to numbers, to suggest I could temporarily help cover something. But she didn't. What she asked instead was quieter. "Can you come by this weekend?" she said. "I need help sorting things." Sorting things. She meant packing. When I pulled into the driveway that Saturday, the house looked like it was already half gone. Boxes lined the hallway. The living room shelves were empty except for dust marks where framed photos had been. She was sitting at the kitchen table, The same place where she once told me I didn't understand how the real world worked. Now the real world had arrived without asking for permission. "Hi," she said softly. I nodded and set my bag down. For a while, we packed in silence. I wrapped plates in newspaper. She folded curtains carefully, as if they still mattered. Finally, she spoke. "I kept thinking I could turn it around before anyone noticed," she said. "Every time I borrowed more, I told myself it was the last time." I didn't interrupt. I didn't want them to see me as irresponsible. She continued. "I've always been the one who had everything together. But you didn't," I said gently. "No," she admitted. "I didn't." She placed a stack of old mail on the table. I recognized some of the envelopes, the red stamps, the warnings I had tried to show her. "I should have listened to you," she said. "I just couldn't stand the idea of my daughter thinking I had failed." "I never thought you failed," I replied. "I thought you were in trouble." She looked at me then, really looked at me, as if seeing something she had missed before. "I thought you were judging me," she said. "I was worried about you." The difference seemed to land. Outside, a truck drove slowly past the house. A man stepped out and glanced toward the yard. Maybe a potential buyer. Maybe just curious. The world keeps moving, even when yours stops. "Your uncle called," she said after a moment. "He said you warned him too." "I didn't warn him," I replied. "I told him the truth." "And I called you a liar." "Yes." The word didn't carry anger anymore, just fact. She pressed her lips together, fighting something behind her eyes. "I was ashamed," she said. "It felt easier to make you the problem than to admit I was." I didn't know what to say to that, because she was right. It had been easier for her to discredit me than to confront the numbers. "Why didn't you ask for help?" I asked quietly. "Because asking would have meant admitting I couldn't fix it alone." I leaned back against the counter. "Trying to fix it alone is what made it worse." She nodded slowly. "I see that now." The house felt different without furniture. The echo in the hallway made every movement louder. 2 years ago, at that reunion, I had stood alone while everyone watched. I remember the way their eyes shifted away from me when she spoke. Now, some of those same relatives had stopped by earlier that week to help carry boxes. Their tone was different, softer, less certain. The truth had caught up. "I don't expect you to solve this," she said suddenly. "I know I pushed you away. I'm not here to solve it," I replied. "I'm here because you're my mother." Her shoulders dropped slightly, as if she had been bracing for something harsher. "I don't deserve that," she murmured. "Maybe not," I said honestly. "But that doesn't change the fact that I tried." She nodded. "And I know that now." The bank would take the house in a few days. There was no reversing it. The numbers were too large, the deadlines too close. But in that empty kitchen, surrounded by half-packed boxes, something else shifted. For the first time, she wasn't defending herself. She wasn't rewriting the story. She wasn't protecting her pride. She was facing it. "I wish I had listened," she said quietly. "So do I answered, not because I wanted to be right, but because being right had cost us more than I ever wanted. And as we carried the last box out to the car, I understood something clearly. The bank took the house, but pride was what really lost her everything. The day the bank officially took the house, we stood across the street and watched strangers walk in and out with clipboards. No one shouted, no one argued. There was no dramatic confrontation, just paperwork. A man changed the locks while my mother stood beside me holding her purse with both hands, as if she needed something solid to hold on to. "That's it?" she asked quietly. "That's it," I replied. The house that had once been her proof of success was now just an asset in someone else's file. On the drive to the small apartment she had rented for the month, she didn't turn on the radio. She kept staring out the window. "I kept telling myself it wasn't that serious," she said after a while. "Even after the final notice." "I know," I answered. "I thought if I just delayed it long enough, something would change." "What were you waiting for?" I asked gently. She didn't answer right away. "For someone to fix it," she said finally. The irony sat heavy between us. You had someone trying to, I replied. She nodded slowly. I know. That admission no longer sounded forced. It sounded tired. We carried her boxes into the apartment. It was small, clean, and temporary. The kind of place you stay in when you're rebuilding, not when you're pretending. As we unpacked, she stopped in the middle of the room and looked at me. You know what hurt the most? She said. What? Not losing the house. I waited. It was realizing you were right, and I pushed you away anyway. The words didn't feel like victory. They felt like something fragile. I didn't want to be right, I said. I wanted you to be safe. She sat down on the edge of the bed and covered her face for a moment. I was so focused on how things looked, she said. I forgot what they actually were. That was the simplest explanation of everything. The renovations, the borrowed money, the public denial. It had never been about survival. It had been about appearance. I'm sorry, she said quietly. The apology wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was clear. For calling you a liar, she continued. For making you stand there alone. I remembered that afternoon at the reunion. The way everyone looked at me with doubt. The way she shut me down with one sentence. I stood alone that day, I said calmly. But I don't want you standing alone now. She looked up at me, surprised. You'd still help me? She asked. I won't fix what you broke, I replied honestly. But I won't walk away either. There was a difference. Helping doesn't mean erasing consequences. It means facing them together. She nodded, as if she finally understood that distinction. Outside, traffic moved normally. People went to work. Life didn't pause for personal disasters. But inside that small apartment, something had shifted. For years, she had protected her pride. Now she was choosing honesty. And for the first time since that reunion, we were speaking without an audience, without performance, without pretending. She had called me a liar in front of everyone. Years later, the bank had proven I was telling the truth. But what mattered more was this. She finally admitted I had tried to save her. Not because I won. Not because she lost. But because reality left no room for denial. And sometimes, the loudest proof doesn't come from family arguments. It comes from a notice taped to your front door, a week after she moved into the apartment. I came back with groceries. Not because she asked. Because I knew pride doesn't disappear overnight. She opened the door before I knocked. Like she had been waiting. The place still smelled new. Cardboard boxes stacked in one corner. A folding table serving as a desk. No framed photos on the walls yet. It looked nothing like the house she had lost. And maybe that was the point. We sat across from each other with 2 cups of tea between us. No large dining table. No audience. No performance. I keep replaying that day, she said quietly. The reunion. She nodded. I can still see your face when I said it. I didn't answer right away. You made it easy for them not to believe me, I said gently. You gave them a reason. I know. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. I was terrified, she continued. If they believed you, it meant I had failed, and I didn't know who I was without looking successful. There it was. Not debt. Not miscalculation. Identity. You wouldn't have failed by asking for help, I said. I thought I would. She looked around the small apartment. And now? Now I know losing a house is survivable, she said slowly. Losing your child's trust is worse. That sentence stayed in the air between us. Trust. That had been the real loss. I don't hate you, I said honestly. But things aren't the same. I don't expect them to be. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically. Just stripped of armor. You were the only one who told me the truth, she said. Everyone else just complimented the paint color. I let out a quiet breath. I wasn't trying to be brave, I said. I was trying to be responsible. She gave a small, sad smile. And I called you a liar. Yes, this time. The word didn't hurt. It just existed. I can't undo that, she said. No, I agreed. But you can stop pretending. She nodded. I am done pretending. Outside, someone laughed in the hallway. Life continued. Smaller but real. I don't need you to prove I was right. I told her. I needed you to be honest. I am now. And she was. Not polished, not proud, just honest. When I stood to leave, she walked me to the door. Thank you for not giving up on me, she said. I didn't give up, I replied. I stepped back. There's a difference. As I walked down the apartment stairs, I realized something that surprised me. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt steady. Years ago, she stood up in front of our entire family and told them I didn't know what I was talking about. Now, without witnesses, she admitted I had tried to save her. The bank took her house, but it also took the illusion she had built around herself. And what remained wasn't wealth or pride, it was truth. Sometimes, that's all that's left, and sometimes, that's enough.